The stars had never seemed so close until the day they brought chains instead of friendship. Captain Jiwan stood on the observation deck of Unity Prime, watching the massive alien ships materialize in Earth's orbit. These were the Drakmari, the first alien civilization humanity had ever encountered. Their vessels gleamed like silver monuments, each one larger than any structure humans had built in space. For 3 days, the meetings had gone well. The Drakmari showed their technology, spoke of trade, smiled with mouths that held too many teeth. On the 4th day, everything changed. High Chancellor Vexroth called a special assembly. Every human leader watched the broadcast. Every person on Earth waited to hear what new wonders the aliens would share. Instead, Vexroth spoke words that made the blood freeze in human veins. He called it the Compliance Doctrine. According to laws written long before humans discovered fire, any species without proper faster-than-light travel belonged to those who possessed it. The Drakmari declared humanity property, slaves, resources to be distributed across their empire like cattle. Ambassador. Hyjin stood up so fast her chair crashed backward. She demanded to know what kind of sick joke this was. Dr. Minho, scientist who had spent days sharing Earth's biological data with the aliens, felt his stomach turn. Captain Jiwan reached for a sidearm, but Drakmari soldiers were already moving through Unity Prime, their weapons humming with power that could turn a human body to ash. The broadcast continued on every screen across Earth. Vexroth explained that humans would be sorted by their abilities. Strong ones for mining colonies, smart ones for computational work, attractive ones for service positions. Children would be separated from parents, educated in obedience, bred for compliance. He spoke like someone discussing livestock, not thinking beings. He spoke like someone who had done this many times before. Down on Earth, the reaction was immediate and violent. Not violence from fear, but violence from rage. In Seoul, millions poured into the streets. In New York, in Lagos, in Mumbai, in Sao Paulo, humanity roared its defiance. People who had never agreed on anything suddenly united around one simple truth. They would die free before living as slaves. Premier Daeho convened the Global Defense Council in Geneva within hours. General Sun Hee slammed her fist on the table hard enough to crack the wood. Admiral Taiyang pulled up tactical displays showing Earth's pathetic defense fleet against 70 Drakmari warships. The humans had 12 combat vessels designed to push asteroids, not fight wars. Every military mind in the room knew this was a battle. It could not win conventionally. In a bunker 300 meters below Geneva, sealed behind doors that could withstand nuclear strikes, Dr. Minho presented the option nobody wanted to hear. For 30 years, Project Prometheus had existed in the darkest corners of human science. These were weapons the international community had banned before they were ever built. Bombs that could tear holes in space. Biological agents that rewrote DNA. Quantum devices that made matter forget how to exist. The scientists who proposed them were called madmen. Now those madmen were humanity's only hope. The debate lasted 6 hours. Some council members argued that using such weapons would make humanity the monsters. Others pointed out that moral high ground meant nothing if you were dead. Then Hyjin spoke. She had escaped from Drakmari custody with information that made the council members physically sick. She had seen their files. Recordings of 47 other species they had enslaved over 2,000 years. Entire civilizations worked to death. Populations bred and modified until they could not remember what freedom meant. Children genetically altered to be incapable of rebellion. The Drakmari did not see humans as potential slaves. They saw humans as raw material. Within 5 generations, they planned to breed humanity into subspecies that could not interbreed, could not unite, could not resist. Baseline humanity would cease to exist, replaced by dozens of specialized variants serving Drakmari needs across their empire. Premier Daeho looked at each council member in turn. He asked for a vote. The result was unanimous. Project Prometheus was activated. Every factory on Earth began retooling. Every resource was directed toward one goal, making the Drakmari regret the day they found Earth. On Unity Prime. Captain Ji-won and her team remained prisoners. The Drakmari treated them well enough, like valuable merchandise that should not be damaged. But Ji-won watched through the windows as more Drakmari ships arrived. As they deployed orbital platforms that jammed Earth's communications, she watched them prepare to harvest humanity like a crop. Then she saw something that made her smile. Down on Earth, lights blazed from every industrial center. Factories that had been idle for years roared back to life. Construction that should take months was happening in days. Humanity was mobilizing with a speed that confused the Drakmari observers. They did not understand what they were seeing. They thought humans were preparing to meet quotas, to comply efficiently. They were wrong. Humans were preparing for war. 3 weeks passed. The Drakmari grew impatient. They decided to begin harvesting operations ahead of schedule. Their target was Seoul, a city of 10 million people. Landing craft descended through the atmosphere, carrying soldiers confident in their superiority. They had done this to 47 other species. Humans would be no different. The landing craft touched down in the city center. Soldiers marched out in formation, weapons ready to stun and capture. They expected screaming crowds trying to flee. Instead, they found empty streets. Then Commander Yaji gave the order, and Seoul became hell. The first Prometheus weapon activated. Drakmari soldiers simply vanished. Their armor collapsed. Their weapons clattered to empty ground. 300 soldiers reduced to nothing in 17 minutes. Not one returned to their ships. Human engineers swarmed the abandoned landing craft, already hacking their systems, stealing their technology. High Chancellor Vexroth watched from orbit in disbelief. Then his disbelief turned to rage. He ordered the orbital bombardment of Seoul. 10 million humans would die as an example to the rest. But as his ships moved into position, Captain Ji-won and her crew broke free. They seized the Drakmari shuttle and fled Unity Prime down on Earth. The orbital defense forces scrambled. Admiral Tai Yang led 12 human vessels against 70 alien warships to save Seoul. It was suicide. Everyone knew it. They launched anyway because that is what humans do when cornered. They fired prototype weapons that accelerated metal to speeds that shattered physics. 3 human ships died in the first exchange. But they crippled 2 Drakmari cruisers and forced the bombardment fleet to retreat. Seoul was saved. 10 million people lived because hundreds died protecting them. And across the Drakmari fleet, the aliens began to understand they had made a terrible mistake. These humans did not think like prey. They thought like predators defending their territory. They thought like a species that had clawed its way to the top of their world's food chain, would not surrender that position. The war for humanity's freedom had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The victory at Seoul bought humanity time, but everyone knew it would not last. High Chancellor Vexroth still controlled the orbital space around Earth. His fleet had taken damage, yes, but he still had 68 warships against Earth's 9 remaining vessels. The blockade remained in place. No supplies could reach the orbital stations. No reinforcements could be sent up from the surface. Earth was choking slowly while the Drakmari repaired their ships and waited for revenge. In the Geneva Command Center, Engineer Yemen stood before the Defense Council with a plan so dangerous that 3 members walked out rather than vote on it. He wanted to convert every spacecraft humanity possessed into unmanned bombs. Mining haulers, luxury yachts, research vessels, cargo transports, even the old colony ships mothballed in lunar orbit. Everything that could fly would become a weapon. The plan had a name: Ghost Fleet Initiative. Each vessel would be controlled by experimental artificial intelligence, making decisions without human input. This violated treaties humanity had written after decades of war about the dangers of autonomous weapons. But those treaties assumed wars between humans. Nobody had written rules for fighting aliens who wanted to breed your species into extinction. Dr. Yoonji led the team that created the AI systems. She programmed them with something the Drakmari could never anticipate: human irrationality. Drakmari combat computers operated on pure logic, optimizing every decision for maximum efficiency. Human AI operated on rage, sacrifice, and unpredictable aggression. The Ghost Fleet would do things that made no tactical sense, trade their existence for minimal gains, and attack from angles that should be impossible. Admiral Taiyang coordinated the construction effort. Every shipyard in Earth's system worked around the clock. Factories on Mars produced hull plating. Stations around Jupiter manufactured fusion warheads. The belt mining colonies contributed every resource they could spare. In 6 weeks, humanity produced 400 Ghost Fleet vessels. They were ugly, crude things with no shields and minimal armor. But each one carried enough explosive power to cripple a Drakmari cruiser. The Ghost Fleet launched in waves. Not at the main Drakmari blockade, but at something more vulnerable, supply lines. The Drakmari fleet needed constant resupply from logistics vessels that brought food, ammunition, and replacement parts. These supply ships were lightly armed, designed to operate in safe space. They were not prepared for swarms of human drones that emerged from the asteroid, felt like angry hornets. The first supply convoy died without sending a distress signal. 12 Ghost Fleet vessels materialized from behind a cluster of asteroids, accelerating to ramming speed. The Drakmari escort tried to intercept them, but the human drones split into impossible patterns, each making decisions that contradicted the others. When the drones detonated their fusion cores, the entire convoy vanished in overlapping fireballs. Over 3 days, Vexroth lost 30% of his support fleet. His warships began rationing ammunition. Food supplies for his crew ran low. The blockade started to fracture as ships repositioned to protect their logistics network instead of watching Earth. But Vexroth was not stupid. He sent a message back to the Drakmari Empire, transmitted through quantum communication that humans could not intercept. The message was simple. Earth is dangerous. Send overwhelming force. An armada of 300 warships began the journey to Earth. They would arrive in 4 months. When they did, no amount of courage or clever tactics would save humanity. Captain Juwan understood the math. She gathered the survivors of her crew aboard the rebuilt human cruiser Indomitable. Dr. Minho, his hands still shaking from the experiments he had conducted on captured Drakmari DNA. Commander Yeji, bearing fresh scars from the battle at Seoul. Young pilot Hajun, only 19 years old but already the best spacecraft operator humanity had produced. She told them the truth. Earth could not win defensively. The only path to survival was offense. Humanity needed to strike at the Drakmari Empire itself, destroy their industrial capacity, break their will to fight. But first, they needed something the Drakmari possessed and humans lacked, a faster-than-light vessel with navigation. Data showing the way to Drakmari space. The target was the heavy cruiser Sovereign Claw. Currently docked at a repair station orbiting Neptune, it had taken damage from Ghost Fleet attacks and would be vulnerable. The mission was simple in concept and suicide in practice. Capture an enemy warship, download its navigation data, and escape before Drakmari reinforcements arrived. 40 Special Operations soldiers volunteered. They trained for 2 weeks on mock-ups built from intelligence gathered from destroyed Drakmari vessels. They learned the layout, the security systems, the crew patterns. Commander Yeji led the assault teams. She did not give speeches about glory or sacrifice. She simply told them, succeed or humanity dies. The infiltration began aboard a captured Drakmari transport. Its identification codes hacked by Dr. Yoongi's team. They approached the repair station broadcasting false distress signals. The Drakmari sentries allowed them to dock, believing they were seeing a damaged Allied vessel. 40 humans in stolen armor crept through the airlock. Everything went perfect until the bioscanners activated. Automated security systems detected human DNA where none should exist. Alarms shrieked through every corridor. Blast doors slammed shut. The Drakmari crew, caught sleeping or relaxing during repair time, scrambled for weapons and armor. What followed was brutal combat in tight corridors where there was no room for tactics, only violence. The Drakmari were stronger than humans, their reflexes faster, their personal shields able to absorb multiple gunshots. But the human soldiers wore powered exoskeletons that equalized the strength difference. Their weapons fired, bullets loaded with nanobots that disassembled. Drakmari cells on contact. Commander Yeji took a hit that shattered 3 ribs and punctured her lung. She continued fighting, firing her weapon with one hand while dragging a wounded soldier with the other. When a Drakmari soldier tried to execute the wounded man, Yeji killed the alien with her combat knife. Stabbing through a gap in the armor she had memorized during training, the battle for the bridge lasted 40 minutes. 14 humans died, their bodies left in Drakmari corridors. But the survivors reached the bridge and secured it. Dr. Minho, fighting through pain medication for his own injuries, accessed the navigation computer and downloaded everything: stellar maps showing thousands of colony worlds, supply routes, military base locations, and most importantly, the coordinates of Drakmar Prime. The Drakmari homeworld. Young Hajun performed the impossible when Drakmari reinforcements arrived. With enemy ships closing from all sides, he activated the faster-than-light drive while still inside Neptune's gravity well. This should have torn the ship apart, ripped it into subspace fragments. Instead, Hajun threaded the needle, calculating vectors that Drakmari computers said were impossible. And the Sovereign Claw leaped into faster-than-light travel, leaving the pursuers behind in normal space. During the 3-week journey back to Earth, Dr. Minho analyzed the captured data and discovered something that changed everything. The Council of Ascended Civilizations, the galactic authority that supposedly made slavery legal, was a lie. It did not exist as a real government. 3 species, the Drakmari and their 2 allies, had invented this fake council to justify enslaving younger civilizations. For 2,000 years, they had used this fiction to enslave 47 species. Only 3 of those species survived long enough to win their freedom. The others were extinct, worked to death, or genetically modified beyond recognition. Worse, the files contained detailed plans for humanity's future. The Drakmari wanted to breed humans into specialized subspecies, some modified for deep space mining and radiation-heavy environments, others for combat operations on high-gravity worlds, still others for infiltration missions among species with similar biochemistry. Within 5 generations, baseline humanity would cease to exist. When Captain Jiwan presented this information to Earth's government, Premier Deho authorized Operation Extinction Protocol. Humanity would not merely defend itself, it would actively destroy the Drakmari. Empire's capacity to threaten any species ever again. Engineers began reverse engineering. The captured faster-than-light drive. Shipyards started construction on a new class of warship. They were called Ragnarok-class vessels. Maximum armor, maximum weapons, minimal crew space. Humanity planned to build 50 of them. The first ship, christened Wrath of Terra, launched 6 weeks later. Captain Jiwan stood on its bridge, looking at Earth through the viewscreen one last time. She had been given command of humanity's first true offensive into alien space. Her mission was clear: show the Drakmari what happens when you try to enslave a species of survivors. The Wrath of Terra led 12 human warships through the darkness, between stars, traveling faster than light toward Drakmari space. Captain Jiwan sat in the command chair, watching the countdown display. 3 days until they reached their target, Zolar 7, a mining colony that supplied rare minerals for Drakmari shield generators. Intelligence reported 20,000 Drakmari, overseers, and 60,000 slaves from multiple species working the mines. The rules of engagement were clear: liberate the enslaved, offer surrender to the overseers, destroy everything else. Premier Deho had been explicit. Humanity would not become conquerors, but they would be liberators. Even if liberation required fire and blood, Commander Yeji moved through the ship, checking her assault teams. Her ribs had healed from the Neptune operation, but she still felt pain when she breathed too deeply. She ignored it. 200 soldiers prepared their equipment, checking weapons and armor. Most were veterans of the Soul Defense. All of them understood this mission would be brutal. When the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Zolar 7, the Drakmari defenders had mere minutes to react. Their long-range sensors, designed to detect Drakmari faster-than-light signatures, did not recognize the modified drives on human ships. By the time the colonial defense forces scrambled their fighters, The Wrath of Terra was already in low orbit deploying drop pods. 200 armored, humans fell through the atmosphere like meteorites. They hit the mining districts in coordinated strikes, targeting overseer command centers and weapon depots. The Drakmari defenders, comfortable and lazy from years of unopposed rule over helpless slaves, found themselves fighting enemies who had been forged in desperate combat. But something unexpected happened. As the human soldiers attacked the overseers, the enslaved populations rose in rebellion. A species called the Thrin, who had been enslaved for 300 years and bred specifically for toxic mining work, proved to be fierce fighters. Their natural resistance to chemical weapons turned them into perfect allies. When the Drakmari tried to gas entire districts to suppress the uprising, engineer Yemen led demolition teams through the industrial sectors, placing charges on refineries and processing plants. Each explosion was carefully calculated to destroy infrastructure while minimizing casualties to the slave quarters. Thermite burned through support structures. Shaped charges collapsed reactor containment. Within 2 hours, Zolar 7's industrial capacity was reduced to rubble and molten metal. The Drakmari overseers realized they would not win. In a final act of spite, they began executing the slave populations. Broadcasting threats to kill everyone if the humans did not withdraw, Captain Jiwan faced a choice that would haunt her forever. She could withdraw and let 60,000 slaves die. Or she could order orbital strikes on the overseer command centers. Knowing that some slaves would die in the bombardment, she chose the bombardment. Railguns fired from orbit, tungsten rods accelerating to impossible speeds. The overseer command centers vanished in overlapping explosions. Most slaves survived. Some did not. Giwan would see their faces in her nightmares for years afterward. But she would make the same choice again, because hesitation would have killed everyone by the time Drakmari reinforcements arrived from nearby systems. The human fleet had already extracted 17,000 liberated slaves, loaded them onto transports, and departed into faster-than-light travel. 3 human ships had been destroyed in the engagement. 400 personnel would never return to Earth. But Zolar 7 burned, its infrastructure destroyed. Its liberation complete. News of the liberation spread through underground channels faster than the Drakmari could suppress it. Suddenly, the primitive humans who were supposed to be easy prey were waging a campaign that threatened the entire foundation of the Drakmari economy. On 17 different colony worlds, enslaved populations rose in rebellion. Inspired by humanity's example, most of these uprisings were crushed within days. The Drakmari had perfected techniques for suppressing rebellions over 2,000 years. But crushing these uprisings required diverting military resources from the Earth's offensive to internal security. Every ship sent to pacify a colony world was one less ship threatening humanity's homeworld. Premier Deho launched a diplomatic offensive alongside the military. CAMPAIGN Dr. Yunji, now serving as humanity's ambassador, made contact with the 2 other species complicit in the fake Council of Ascended Civilizations. The Velthorians and the Karate had supported the Drakmari enslavement doctrine for centuries. Profiting from the trade in slaves and resources, Dr. Yunji's message was simple and terrifying. Humanity had no quarrel with species that left it alone. But any civilization that supported enslavement would be treated as an enemy. To prove humanity's seriousness, she demonstrated a new Prometheus protocol weapon called Sunbreaker. The demonstration took place in an uninhabited star system. A single device, launched from a human vessel, entered the system's sun and induced stellar instability. The resulting solar flare was powerful enough to have sterilized any orbiting planets. The message was clear. Humanity possessed weapons that could commit acts of astronomical warfare. The Karate, who were traitors and pragmatists at heart, immediately declared neutrality and withdrew all support from the Drakmari Empire. They even offered to share intelligence about Drakmari fleet movements in exchange for guarantees that humanity would not target their space. The Velthorians refused to abandon their allies, but began fortifying their own territory, suggesting they feared becoming humanity's next target. Meanwhile, back at Earth, The reinforcement fleet finally arrived 4 months after the initial proclamation. 300 Drakmari warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, expecting to find a defenseless planet ready for harvest. Instead, they found a system bristling with weapons platforms, Ghost Fleet vessels, and 25 Ragnarok-class warships. Admiral Tai Yang commanded Earth's defense. He did not wait for the Drakmari to establish orbital superiority or organize their formation. His ships charged directly into the incoming fleet, breaking every rule of conventional space combat. It was aggressive, reckless, and completely unexpected. The Second Battle of Earth became a savage close-range brawl. Humanity lost 14 vessels in the first hour, but their sacrifice allowed Ghost Fleet drones to penetrate deep into the Drakmari formation. 3 Drakmari capital ships were destroyed when kamikaze drones detonated their fusion cores against their hulls. The remaining Drakmari fleet, demoralized by facing enemies who should have been helpless, began to lose cohesion. Young Hajun, now commanding the Indomitable, performed maneuvers that made veteran pilots weep with envy. He brought his ship through gaps in the Drakmari formation that should not have existed, firing railguns at point-blank range, then disappearing before return fire could find him. When High Chancellor Vexroth's flagship took a direct hit that crippled its engines, the Drakmari fleet broke. The surviving enemy ships retreated in disorder. Abandoning the blockade of Earth, Admiral Tai Yang broadcast a message to the fleeing vessels. His words transmitted on every frequency. "Tell your empire that Earth is coming. Tell them we will not stop until every chain is broken and every slaver world burns. Tell them they awakened the wrong species." In the months that followed, humanity's offensive intensified. Fleet after fleet launched from Earth's shipyards, each carrying liberation forces and enough firepower to reduce colony worlds to ash. Captain Juan led the largest of these fleets toward the ultimate target, Drakmar Prime, the Drakmari homeworld. The armada consisted of 43 warships, 200 Ghost Fleet vessels, and 30,000 liberation troops. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. As they traveled through Drakmari space, they liberated for more colony worlds, each following the same pattern: overwhelming force, minimal warning, complete destruction of enslavement infrastructure. With each liberation, more freed slaves joined humanity's cause. The Thryn provided entire battalions of fighters. Other species contributed intelligence about Drakmari defenses. A coalition of the oppressed formed around humanity's war effort, united by the simple truth that the Drakmari Empire had to fall. When the human fleet finally emerged from faster-than-light travel at Drakmar Prime, Captain Juan broadcast a message to the planet below. 12 billion Drakmari lived on the homeworld, protected by thousands of orbital platforms and 600 warships of the home fleet. By every calculation, humanity's forces should be annihilated. The message was simple. You proclaimed us slaves. We offer one chance for peace. Surrender your leaders. Abolish slavery across your empire. Submit to reparations. Or watch your civilization end. The response from Drakmar Prime was defiance. The home fleet mobilized. The orbital platforms charged their weapons. The Drakmari leadership broadcast speeches about the strength of their empire and the weakness of primitive humans. They promised their citizens that this rebellion would be crushed like all the others before it. They did not understand that humanity was not rebelling. Humanity was erasing them from existence. The final battle of Drakmar Prime began with fire falling from the sky. 200 Ghost Fleet vessels accelerated toward the orbital defense platforms, each drone carrying enough explosive power to crack a small moon. The Drakmari home fleet moved to intercept their 600 warships, confident in their numerical superiority. They had defended their homeworld for 1,000 years. No enemy had ever breached their defenses. Humanity would be the first and last. Captain Yuan watched from the bridge of the Wrath of Terra as the battle unfolded. She had fought for 18 months to reach this moment. Every decision she made now would determine whether humanity survived, or whether they would be hunted down and exterminated for their defiance. She felt the weight of 12 billion human lives depending on her tactical choices. the Ghost Fleet executed a maneuver that would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy. Instead of engaging the home fleet directly, they split into 4 groups and targeted the Drakmari logistics network. Fuel depots exploded. Ammunition stockpiles detonated. Repair stations collapsed into burning wreckage. The drones sacrificed themselves by the dozens. But each sacrifice degraded the enemy's ability to sustain combat operations. 43. Human warships engaged the home fleet in a running battle that covered millions of kilometers of space. The Drakmari had superior numbers and superior technology in many areas, but they had never fought an enemy like humanity. Every time they established a firing line, human ships would break formation and charge directly at them, accepting casualties to disrupt their coordination. Commander Yeji led her assault forces in a desperate boarding action against a Drakmari command ship. Her soldiers used captured transport vessels to approach under the cover of weapon fire, then breached the hull with shaped charges. Fighting through the corridors was nightmarish. The Drakmari crew fought with desperate courage, knowing that if their command networks fell, the entire defense would collapse. Yeji took a plasma burn that seared through her left arm, melting armor and flesh together. She switched her weapon to her right hand and kept fighting. When a Drakmari officer tried to activate the ship's self-destruct sequence, she killed him with a point-blank shot, then had Dr. Minho's medical team sedate her before the pain made her pass out. Engineer. Men deployed the most devastating Prometheus protocol weapons in humanity's arsenal. Zero-point bombs created temporary singularities that consumed entire Drakmari cruisers. Quantum disruption fields caused whole formations to phase out of normal space, lost forever in dimensional voids. Biological agents carefully calibrated to avoid the 12 billion civilians on the planet below. Targeted Drakmari naval crews with terrifying efficiency. But the true turning point came when the remaining Ghost Fleet vessels executed Protocol Endgame. 200 drones, each controlled by artificial intelligence, programmed with human aggression and willingness to sacrifice, coordinated an impossible maneuver. They synchronized their faster-than-light drives and emerged from jump. Space in a perfect sphere around Drakmar Prime's largest moon. Then they all detonated their fusion cores simultaneously. The resulting explosion could be seen from neighboring star systems. The shockwave and radiation burst disabled 70% of the orbital defense platforms. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out communication networks across half the planet. In a single moment of coordinated destruction, humanity had leveled the battlefield. The Wrath of Terra led the breakthrough. Captain Jiwan's tactical brilliance shone as she coordinated fleet movements through the chaos. Her ship took damage from a dozen different sources, armor plates ablating under sustained fire, but she pushed forward. Behind her, the human fleet followed. Punching through the disrupted Drakmari lines like a spear through rotten wood, young Hajun piloted the Indomitable through fire that should have destroyed any vessel. He threaded between exploding ships, dove through debris fields, and somehow kept his ship intact when 3 others were blown apart around him. His skill kept the second wave of assault forces alive long enough to reach the planet's surface. Commander Yeji woke up in the medical bay, her arm wrapped in regenerative bandages, and immediately demanded to be returned to combat. The medical staff tried to sedate her again, but she knocked the needle away and stumbled to the armory. She loaded a fresh weapon, sealed her damaged armor as best she could, and joined the drop pod assault on the Imperial Palace. 5,000 human soldiers fell from orbit in armored pods, punching through the atmosphere like bullets, anti-aircraft. Fire destroyed dozens of pods, but the majority survived. They landed in the Palace District, where the Drakmari elite guard waited behind fortifications that had never been breached. The battle for the palace was brutal. The elite guard were the finest warriors the Drakmari Empire could produce, trained. From childhood, equipped with the best armor and weapons their civilization could manufacture. They fought with the desperation of beings defending their homeworld and their species' future. But humanity had spent 18 months fighting for survival. These soldiers had been forged in the defense of Sol, tempered in the liberation of colony worlds, and hardened by the knowledge of what would happen if they failed, they advanced through streets lined with burning vehicles, climbed over barricades made from rubble, and pressed forward even when the casualties mounted to levels that should have broken any military force. Commander personally led the final assault on the palace throne room. Her left arm was useless. Her armor was cracked in a dozen places, and she had lost track of how many soldiers under her command had died. But she kicked open the golden doors to find High Chancellor Vexroth attempting to flee through a hidden escape route. She stunned him with a weapon set to non-lethal and dragged him back to the throne room. When Captain Gwyn arrived, they presented Vexroth with a holographic display showing all 47 species. The Drakmari had enslaved over 2,000 years. The populations that had been worked to extinction, the cultures that had been erased, children who had been bred into subspecies that could never be free. Vexroth tried to justify it. He spoke about the natural order of the galaxy, about strong species dominating weak ones, about how the Drakmari had brought civilization to primitive worlds. Gwyn listened to his speech, then showed him one more image. Earth, scarred by war, but still free, still human, still defiant. "You called us slaves," Gwyn said. "You were wrong. We are survivors. We are liberators. And we are the species that will ensure the galaxy never sees another empire like yours." 3 hours later, the Drakmari Empire formally surrendered. The treaty dissolved their government, redistributed their territory to liberated species, and submitted their leadership to trial for crimes against sapient beings. The war was over. But the cost made Captain Gwyn weep. Of the 43 warships that arrived at Drakmar Prime, only 11 survived. 22,000 human personnel had died in the final battle. Earth's industrial capacity had been pushed beyond its limits. The planet would take decades to recover economically. Aboard the Indomitable, Premier Deho held a memorial service for the fallen. Thousands of names were read aloud, each one representing someone who would never return home. Deho spoke about the moral weight of the weapons humanity had deployed, the civilizations they had damaged, the violence they had committed. "We did not want this war," he said, his voice transmitted across the fleet and back to Earth. "We did not choose to become destroyers. But when faced with extinction, we discovered what humanity truly is. A species that will burn the galaxy to ash before accepting chains." In the wreckage of the Imperial Palace, Commander Yaji sat among the ruins and finally allowed herself to feel the pain of her injuries. Dr. Minho found her there and administered proper medical treatment. Her arm would heal, though it would carry scars forever. Just like humanity itself, the Drakmari homeworld surrendered completely within days. Other colony worlds followed. The greatest slave empire in galactic history collapsed like a house built on sand, because they had tried to enslave one species too many. Humanity had won, but they had paid a price that would echo through generations. 5 years passed after the fall of the Drakmari Empire, and the galaxy learned to live in a world humanity had remade through fire and blood. The changes ran deeper than borders on star maps or new governments on former colony worlds. Something fundamental had shifted in how civilizations treated each other. The 47 formerly enslaved species formed the Coalition of Free Peoples, a mutual defense pact designed to prevent any single species from dominating others. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered on Unity Prime, the same station where humanity had first been declared property. Now it served as the Coalition's headquarters, a symbol of how quickly power could shift when slaves decided to break their chains. Admiral Kazun commanded the Coalition fleet from her office overlooking Earth. She had been promoted 3 times. In 5 years, not because she wanted the responsibility, but because no one else had her. Combination of tactical brilliance and moral authority. The soldiers of a dozen species trusted her because she had proven she would sacrifice anything to protect freedom. But command came with a cost. She still dreamed about the orbital bombardment of Sol, about the slaves who died at Zolar 7 when she ordered the strikes on overseer command centers. Her therapist said these were normal responses to impossible choices. Guan wondered if feeling normal about such decisions would actually be worse. Dr. Minho had become the galaxy's leading researcher in multi-species medicine. Working to heal the genetic damage done to enslaved populations, his Institute for Biological Restoration operated branch facilities on 30 worlds. Some of his successes were miraculous. Thrin children born without the toxic resistance genes their ancestors had been forced to carry. Other cases were tragic. Species so heavily modified that returning them to their original genetics would kill them. He worked 18-hour days and rarely slept well. The Drakmari medical files haunted him. He had seen what they planned to do to humanity, the subspecies they wanted to breed, the modifications they would have forced on human children. Sometimes, he wondered if humanity's response had been too merciful. Commander Yeji led Coalition Special Forces, training the next generation of peacekeepers. Her left arm had healed, but it hurt when the weather changed. She considered the constant ache a reasonable price for the freedom it had secured. Students came from 20 different species, learning tactics that combined human aggression with alien strengths. She taught them that violence should always be the last option, but when it became necessary, it should be overwhelming and decisive. She taught them that protecting the innocent sometimes meant making choices that would haunt you forever. Taught them that warriors who sleep peacefully after killing have forgotten why they fight. Engineer Yemen ran the Prometheus Commission, a regulatory body dedicated to controlling dangerous technologies. Many of the weapons that saved humanity during the war had been classified and restricted. Zero-point bombs, quantum disruption, fields and biological agents were locked in a vault beneath Geneva, accessible only with unanimous approval from all 47 Coalition founding species. Yemen hoped the vault would never be opened again, but he maintained the weapons carefully, keeping them functional, because hope was not a strategy. If another species like the Drakmari emerged, humanity needed to be ready to respond with equal force. Dr. Yunji served as Earth's Prime Minister. Having succeeded Premier Deho when he retired, she worked constantly on diplomatic efforts to integrate humanity into the broader galactic community while preserving Earth's sovereignty. It was delicate work. Many species feared humanity's military power and the speed with which they had destroyed a galactic empire. Others sought alliance specifically because of that power. She had to balance making humanity approachable enough to build relationships, while maintaining enough strength to deter aggression. Some days she succeeded. Other days she felt like she was walking a tightrope over an abyss, one misstep away from sparking conflicts that could devastate the coalition she had helped build. Young Hejun, now 34, commanded the exploration vessel New Horizon. His mission was to make first contact with new species, exploring uncharted regions of space. His briefings included a prime directive developed by the Coalition: assess each species' values regarding freedom and self-determination. Before establishing formal relations, if a species practiced slavery or systematic oppression, the Coalition would not engage in diplomatic relations. If they showed hostility toward the concept of freedom, humanity would monitor them carefully. The galaxy had learned that some civilizations could not be reasoned with, only deterred through strength. Hejun had made first contact with 7 new species. 4 became Coalition members. 2 declared neutrality but established trade relationships. 1 threatened military action, and Hejun's fleet had destroyed their orbital weapons platforms in response. The threat was never repeated. On Earth, a monument stood in Seoul at the site where humanity first bloodied the Drakmari invasion. Millions visited it every year. The monument was a simple black wall with 47 columns, one for each species the Drakmari had enslaved. Human names covered most of the wall: the soldiers who died at Seoul, the crews lost in space battles, the civilians killed in bombardments. But other names appeared to Thrin warriors who fought alongside humanity, karate traders who provided intelligence, members of species whose names humans still struggled to pronounce, all united by their opposition to tyranny. The inscription read, "They proclaimed us slaves. We proved we were free. May no species ever face what we faced. May no species ever do what we did." Admiral Juwan stood before the monument on the 5th anniversary of the war's end. Thousands gathered for the ceremony, but she barely heard the speeches. She was thinking about High Chancellor Vexroth, now serving a life sentence in a coalition prison. She had visited him once, trying to understand how an intelligent being could build an empire on slavery. Vexroth had simply said that the strong always dominated the weak. It was the natural order. Juan had responded that humanity proved the natural order could be changed, but only through violence that no one should have to commit. A young child approached the monument, no more than 6 years old. She looked up at Jiwan with wide eyes and asked if the stories were true. Did humans really destroy entire civilizations? Were the tales about weapons that could kill stars just myths? Qiwan knelt to meet the child's eyes. It was a question she had been asked before by students and journalists and historians. The answer never got easier. Yes, she said. We did those things. Not because we wanted to, but because we had to. The Drakmari gave us a choice. Accept slavery or fight with everything we had. We chose to fight. The child processed this seriously, then asked another question. Are we the monsters? Guan considered this carefully. It was the same question she asked herself in quiet moments, the question that kept her awake at night. She could give the child a comfortable lie or a difficult truth. She chose truth. We're human, she said. That means we're capable of both great compassion and terrible violence. Which one we choose depends on how the galaxy treats us. We showed them what happens when you push us too far. But we also showed them what we can build when given a chance for peace. The child nodded, trying to understand concepts too complex for her age. Then she asked one final question. Will there be another war? Jiwan wanted to say no. She wanted to promise this child a peaceful future. But she had learned not to make promises she could not keep. I hope not, she said. We built the coalition to prevent another war. We keep our weapons ready to deter anyone who might start one. But if war comes again, humanity will be ready, and we will protect the innocent no matter the cost. The child thanked her and ran back to her parents. Giwan stood slowly, her own old injuries aching. She walked away from the monument, past the crowds, toward a transport that would take her back to Unity Prime. Behind her, Seoul bustled with life. Humans and aliens walked the streets together, trading in markets, eating in restaurants, living peaceful lives. It was the future humanity had fought for. The dream that 22,000 soldiers had died to secure. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. The chains of slavery were broken, at least in coalition space. Other regions still practiced oppression, still believed in the dominance of strong over weak. Humanity monitored them carefully, ready to respond if they threatened coalition members. Admiral Juwan looked back one last time at the monument. The black wall reflected her face, overlaid with the names of the dead. She saluted them, these ghosts who had purchased freedom with their lives. Then she turned and walked toward her transport. The war was over. The peace was fragile. Humanity would guard both with everything it possessed, because the galaxy had learned what humans were truly capable of. When forced to choose between freedom and extinction, they had chosen freedom. They had paid the price, and they would never forget what that choice cost them.